Good morning here. Nice and warm down here in Inglewood. About 77 degrees. Better get this walk in before it gets too hot. I'm out here walking Mr. Mickey. He's not able to walk this far. So when I was in grade school, I joined a club, stamp club, collecting stamps, and I really got into it. And the reason I got into it was because the teacher, Mr. Schultz, was such a great guy. He was probably the best teacher I ever had. And so every Friday afternoon after school, he'd bring in stamps and we could buy them for our album. And so I went and bought myself a real big album. And I was buying stamps from him and collecting them and asking my father for money to go buy stamps. And I was into the stamp collecting. And I noticed in my stamp album I had a Spanish stamp that had a naked woman on it, full nude. It was a painting, a famous painting, Spanish painting. And so I told my teacher, I said, hey, I'd like to fill this space on my stamp album. And he says, well, if you show me in your album that there's a space for that stamp, then I'll get it for you. Sure enough, I showed him and he got it for me. And but Mr. Schultz was more than just a stamp collector. He was also the best history teacher I ever had. He would stand up front and tell us stories about history, and it was just a great teacher, one of the most loved teachers I ever had. And I think that's why I love history so much today, is because of Mr. Schultz. And the next year I had another teacher named Don Williams, and he was a great history teacher too. And it's amazing that of all the teachers through school, that these two teachers are the only ones that really locked in my memory. And it's because they were passionate, they told stories, and I think that's what teachers should. So I was on the outlook for stamps, and my dad, he worked at the courthouse in Rockford, and when he picked up the garbage and the paper in the offices, I would take the stamps and I'd take them home, and had some pretty interesting stamps, special delivery stamps and so on. So I'd take them home and soak them off of the envelope, so it was something to do. And there was a stamp store downtown. I would go up there. I'd ask my dad for money to buy stamps, and for some reason he gave it to me. He was pretty good to me. And I'll never forget standing in that stamp store, looking over the counters and sniffling because I had a cold. And the guy told me, hey, why don't you blow your nose? I'd never had anybody tell me that before. So I learned how to blow my nose from a stamp store. These are little things that you learn in life, little things. So getting back to the stamp collecting, I was quite a neighborhood person when I was a kid, and I met this lady up the street, and I don't know what, I ended up in her house, and come to find out, her grandfather had collected stamps when he was a kid, and he had tons of stamps. And I wanted those stamps so bad because I knew how valuable those stamps were. But she wouldn't sell me any stamps, but she gave me a few. She gave me a handful of stamps. So I excitedly took them to Mr. Schultz. I said, Mr. Schultz, are these stamps worth any money? I had one stamp that was worth $4,000. And this was just this was just a pittance of the stamps she had. She had thousands and thousands of stamps, and this one stamp was worth like $4,000, and this was back in 1960. I mean, years and years ago. Well, I left that stamp album in my locker, and guess what? Somebody broke into my locker and stole my stamp album. So I had to start all over again. I didn't have that $4,000 stamp anymore. So the moral of the story, don't leave your collections at school, because they could get rid of it.
How come I'm never able to identify where it's coming from? I'd make a candle out of it if I ever found it. Try to sell it, never sell out of it. I probably only sell one. Give it to my brother, cause we have the same nose, same clothes, homegrown, the stones thrown from quick wins from home.